tell my son, who's 15, just do something that makes you different from others. That's so important in life, especially when there's so much vanilla and noise around it. So that would be professionally. Personally, your wife wins every time. Yeah, so learn that early on.
There you have it, viewers. Sage-like advice that even I follow. Welcome back to CEO2CEO, and welcome from the Pos Malaysia headquarters. I'm very excited to be with the Group CEO, Charles Brewer, of Pos Malaysia. And more importantly, Pos Malaysia is a national institution. In fact, if I may be so bold to say, it's an icon. It's been with us for 200 years and connects people to people. But more importantly, what I find very exciting is it's going through a transformation under Charles' leadership. And we're here to tease a little bit of that out and demystify ESG and actually share the journey that Pos Malaysia is going under his leadership. And so welcome, Charles, and thank you for taking time to be with us today and the viewers.
Very, very welcome, Tatu. Pleasure to meet you.
We always have icebreaker questions. Tea or coffee?
Coffee. Actually, I'm a bit weird. I'm a little bit strange. Coffee during the day, tea at home.
Caffeine or non-caffeinated
Caffeine.
tea? Got to have caffeine.
Yeah, sometimes too much.
Milk or sugar?
Milk.
If you had a free hour in a day, what would you do?
These days, spend with my family. Yeah, spending with my family.
Now, very difficult question. How do you describe your job to a 5-year-old?
That's a great question. In fact, I was talking about that just earlier. And I think this is true, by the way, for all leadership, not just for the CEO of Pos Malaysia, but for all leaders, which is fundamentally our role is two things. One is to create shining eyes in our organization. So I have 18,000 amazing Pos Malaysia employees, but my role is to really excite them, get them energized and passionate in today's subject around ESG, but on whatever the subject may be. So really energizing the organization. And to that point, I spent some time living in Singapore, and dragon boat racing started to become something I was particularly interested in. And I worked out that I was useless at driving the oar. It's far too physical, it's very tiring actually, but I was very good on the drum. And so to answer your point, I think the leader's responsibility, or one of the key areas, is to create the drum beat for the organization. Learn when to go fast and learn when you need to slow down. Learn when you need to pick up the pace and learn when you back it off. So create shining eyes and create the drum beat for the organization.
Give a bit of headroom, let people grow?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
Absolutely.
Favourite time of day?
Morning.
Morning person?
Definitely. 5 o'clock in the morning. It's very strange. Even on holidays, ask my family. I don't think they really enjoy going on holiday.
Go for a run, ride a bike?
It can be a run, can be a walk, it can be reading, it can be whatever, but I operate significantly better first thing in the morning than I do at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So my team have learnt not to come and see me with a particularly complex problem at 4 or 5 o'clock on a Friday. That's not a good time. Yeah.
Do you have to start the day with a little bit of physical exercise?
I have to start the day with a coffee.
Fair.
But actually, no, I mean, to your point again, I think in life, sort of our sort of scenarios and priorities change. So to your question, yeah, I do. I like to either run or walk. First, I've now pretty consistently do about 5K a day, which I'm quite happy with. And yeah, it gets the blood moving, gets the head going, gives you. I think the other
thing gives you time to think, right?
I was going to say that's the other thing, and I learned this when I was in Cape Town that cycling was something I really took up, and it's quite a solo sport. Even you may do it with friends or whatever else. And people used to say to me, given I'm a sort of a rugby player and a team sport player, do you still enjoy sort of solo sports? And I said, yeah, because exactly to your point, and it's the same with running or walking, it gives you that sort of bit of alone time, bit of alone time in your head. Yeah.
So my team's aware of something I call morning musings.
Yeah.
And it happens usually after a walk.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you think it through.
I even occasionally, and she's in here somewhere, Fiona and I go for walks first thing in the morning here around Chinatown and grab a coffee.
Lovely.
And I think those are sometimes the most productive sessions that we have, because you're outside, getting a bit of sun, getting a bit of air, body's moving. So yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it's really important. Yeah, really important.
Name 2 things, and don't be modest, you consider yourself to be very good at?
What am I good at? What am I think energizing to the subject earlier. So professionally and personally. Professionally, I think energizing is something I'm fairly good at. From a personal perspective, a bit of empathy. My son follows in my footsteps too, which
Excellent.
my daughter not so much. But I think relatively high levels of empathy. So I can connect quite well with the cleaner, the courier, the postman, the CEO, the whoever. So generally speaking, I think those are probably two things I'm not
You're
too
talking with people, not at people.
people, yeah.
And on that theme, best example of community you've seen recently?
Community.
Yeah.
It's not so recent, but I spent 4 years in Africa, and I had the pleasure of traveling around. There's 52 countries, and so I visited every single one, and some many times. And given this is generally a continent that doesn't have a lot, their ability to operate as a community, whether it's Rwanda after the genocide there, or Nigeria or whatever else, I saw things there that were unbelievably humbling in terms of how they operate as communities. And I think that's true also if you look at Malaysia and sort of you get out into sort of the kampongs and so on and so forth. And I think that's something we should protect and value
And
forever.
foster.
Yeah, family, community is everything. Yeah.
Best advice you've received?
Oh, loads.
It's filtering at that stage.
I guess again, professionally and personally. Professionally, a long time ago, I was given some advice by a sort of informal mentor about recognizing the people around you, the 6 or 7 people around you that will fundamentally shape your career. Really, truly sit back and say, who are the 6 or 7 people that are going to influence my success and the things I want to do? And then find regular reasons to have connections with them. If they don't know who you are, they can't help. True. And if you take again in Pos Malaysia, we have 18,000 employees. Everywhere where I go, some stand out, and their ability to stand out is what will make the difference in their careers going forward. I tell my son, who's 15, the same advice, which is, albeit that he is definitely not top quintile from an education perspective, he has a character and personality that makes him stand out. So that the importance of standing out, the importance of being different, the importance of having an opinion, the importance of being cheeky, the importance of having fun, just do something that makes you different from others. That's so important in life, especially when there's so much vanilla and noise around us. So that would be professionally. Personally, your wife wins every time. Yeah, so learn that early on.
There you have it, viewers. Sage-like advice that even I follow. Now, getting back to the meat, if you like.
Sure.
You're appointed CEO in 2021. That's during COVID as well.
Just at the end, just coming towards the end,
as we transition out. And you've started implementing your environmental, social and governance roadmap since early in 2022. What shifted, or what prompted that shift, if I could ask?
Sure. So when I came in August 2021, the mandate was to your introduction, to transform, and it's a really significant transformation, but transform a heritage brand, a company that's been in Malaysia more than 200 years, one of the oldest companies, if not the oldest company in Southeast Asia and Malaysia. So it's huge, and again, to the point, rich heritage. But what got us here won't get us there. So fundamentally was identifying, okay, what do we need to do differently? What do we need to do to make sure Pos Malaysia is here for another 200 years? So spent the first sort of 2 or 3 months really immersing myself with customers, employees, stakeholders, board members, anybody and everyone that could tell me a bit about what's going on in Malaysia and what's happening in the market. Now, the story of postal operators is not so different from country to country, so that part not so needed. And from that sort of reflection, that sort of discussion, we then created our strategy, which we're still very busy executing. But at the center of that strategy were 2 things that perhaps the board didn't see as particularly obvious when we first came in. One was culture. So, if you're transforming an organization, a key piece of that is thinking about, okay, what's the culture of the company? What culture is required in order for us to be successful going forward? And the second piece to your question was sustainability. And to your question on why sustainability? I guess for three primary reasons. First one is that, personally, I'm passionate about having a tomorrow,
Yep.
and if you look at Malaysia again and, what makes Malaysia an amazing country, a lot of it is under threat because of what's happening with global warming and so on and so forth. So personally, I felt it really, really relevant that Post Malaysia, as part of its transformation, does good to do well. I mean, we're not alone in that. Many other companies besides. Secondly, and this one was, I think, slightly less obvious, is that our people, our employees, and again, many companies are talking about this, so it's a bit of a poster statement, but I think employees today and certainly tomorrow are looking for more than just employment. They're looking for purpose. What is the organization? And our purpose is all about building trust to connect Malaysians and businesses for a better tomorrow. And the key piece there, a better tomorrow. So if we want to be a better tomorrow, we want to be a better organization, clearly doing the right thing from an environmental perspective is pretty critical. 25%, 27% of CO2 emissions in Malaysia come from the transportation sector. So we play our part in that, yeah? So packaging and so on and so forth, with the boom of e-commerce, has a big component to it. So I think the second piece is that our employees are expecting a different post-Malaysia. And the third piece, which again, I think was the one that certainly from my CFO perspective, when his head did a 180, when I told him we were going to embark on a sustainability strategy, is it can be good for your P&L. And that's obviously with Post Malaysia's fiscal challenges is really, really, really important. And, sort of give you a couple of examples. We have 6 work streams, solar panels being one. Every time we put solar panels on a building, we're saving money. Not only are we doing all the things that we're doing for our people and our employees and ticking that box, not only are we doing right for the planet and so on and so forth, but we're also improving our P&L. So across those 3 Ps, that was the reason we chose to embark. And one last point, which is spoken about often, I think a little less relevant in Malaysia today, but will become relevant, is our customers will expect it. They will expect it. So, if you're GlaxoSmithKline, or if you're Sanofi, or if you're a small e-commerce seller, over time, more and more, your expectation of your supplier will be that you are ticking the box in terms of scope 1, 2, and 3, and particularly for them, scope 3. So I think, and again, that's very relevant in Europe, very relevant in North America, and my personal belief is that will become more and more relevant in Malaysia. So as much as we're probably a little bit ahead of the curve on that front, that's a good place to be.
Have you seen the tipping point, Charles? Because that's a really interesting point I want to tease out, because I've often said companies are very simple organisms. Make profit, do.
Yeah.
Don't make profit, don't do. And so clearly the message, viewers, is you can make sustainability work.
Absolutely.
For your bottom line. As Charles had the conversation with his CFO, you've got to break it up into parts. But the other piece is the customer's customer wants it.
Yeah.
And that gets back to that first point I made, that if it makes profit, we should do more of it. But clearly, Post Malaysia is ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
In your journey. And we've seen, at the exchange, for example, we're mandating disclosure. We don't judge, we let customers judge, or investors have a look at. So we start mandating disclosure to put data points out, to educate the market, and also educate boards, to be frank, about the journey around sustainability, around the environment, and building business that will be around for the next 200 years.
Yeah.
To your point previously. Now, clearly Post Malaysia didn't wait for that market, or that, if you like, that thought process to mature. And how did you embark on it, Charles?
Again, like any transformation, you have to recognize you're going to take people through a change curve. So I think the first thing to mention is that it isn't, even if you've got a CEO that's super, super passionate about a given subject, and in today's discussion, sustainability, which clearly I am, but not everybody has that same passion and that same enthusiasm. So we tackled it in a couple of ways. So first and foremost, we looked at, again, very fortunate, I work in a sector where there's 180 other postal operators. So we went and looked at 180 other postal operators to look for what were the red threads, What were they doing that was working really, really well? What were they doing that wasn't working so well? And then we benchmarked, okay, against ourselves, and not just the E or the S or the G. We looked at all three. Yeah, we looked at all three to see, okay, from our perspective, was the biggest opportunity G? Was it bigger? Was it governance? Was it sustainability, or the environment? So we looked at all three, and from that we distilled it down to, okay, look, let's look at what are the most pressing opportunities and priorities. That was one. Second one was then we looked at the three C's. We looked at cost to do it, capability in the Malaysian market, so what was available, which I'll come back to in a second. And then lastly was the capacity of the organization. That's really important. And again, for those watching this, and I reference this at many conferences where I speak about the same, you may want to be many things, but you have to look at the capacity of your organization. And again, specifically with Pos Malaysia, with all of the things that we're doing to transform the organization, we asked ourselves, does the organization have the capacity, for example, to transform its entire fleet from ICE to electric? That's not small. It's a really big piece of work. If you want to put solar panels on 400 buildings, that's a big piece of work, and so on and so forth. So we looked at, does the organization have the capacity to do that? And we made very openly, we communicated very openly to the board and to the organization that we would go as fast or slow based on our ability across those three C's. So if fiscal challenges become a challenge and we have to pull back and go a bit slower, we go a bit slower. If our fiscal performance improves, we can go faster. If the capacity of the organization becomes stretched, we'll slow down and we can go faster if the capacity of the organization is improved. And to the point on capability of available products in the market, when we first started, and as an example, the available fleet or options around EV was two providers. There were two providers in Malaysia when we first started this for two-wheel. Now there's sort of 8 or 10 of those available. So the market in Malaysia is moving super fast in terms of whether it be solar panels, whether it be environmentally friendly packaging, whether it be vehicles. That's changing quite fast, and the cost is coming down. So in many respects, and we kind of knew this when we embarked on it, we felt we'll go slow to go fast, and we'll get faster, and pretty much so far that's borne out. And then the last point to your question was, having sort of written the plan to a very, to your earlier point, to the lowest level. I mean, every single vehicle we looked at, when would we replace that vehicle? We have a list across 7,000 two-wheel and another 1,000 four and trucks. We know exactly when those vehicles will be replaced over the next few years. That gets to 100% by 2030, by 2030. So we know when we get there. So you have to break it down to the smallest level. And then communicating that plan internally to your organization, to the board, obviously. So making sure the board sign up to it. And that's really important on all of the things we do. And then thirdly, externally, making a commitment externally, which we did in April last year.
Charles, would it be fair to say that Pos Malaysia is catalytic in driving change for the wider community? Because of your reach, because of your fleet, your employees, because you'll be supporting that transition from ICE to EV, and with the fleet and with the reach, it puts charging stations in the reach of everyone.
Yeah, and it's a really good point, Datuk. So, again, it's a little bit of a personal pride here, but I think it's a really important point. So when we were sort of embarking on this journey and we engaged a great company that's worked with us to help us develop our plan, I asked them the question. So given that this is pretty new for Malaysia, who do I go and talk to in Malaysia that can help us understand solar panels or help us understand defleeting or moving from ICE to electric or packaging? Who do I go into? Who's the sort of the poster child and the benchmark that the team, the sustainability team that we hired, and I could go and talk to and listen and learn from? And the answer was, there isn't anybody. And that's okay. I mean, that's okay. So to your point, I think one of the added values of doing what we're doing, and there are so many values of doing what we're doing, but one of the added ones is two things. One is, I think, I'm really, really happy that you Bursa and the government have made commitments that you've made and made it much more obvious that this is the expectation of organisations in Malaysia. But you and the government need lighthouse examples. I think you need to have the ability to, when you're standing on stage or talking about this with other companies or new companies that are just listed, and you talk to them about the requirements, who can they go and talk to? The answer is they can now come and talk to Pos Malaysia. I think it's so important in any, whether you talk about diversity or whether you talk about ESG or digital transformation, any of these sort of major sort of movements that are going on globally, that there are lighthouse examples in the country that people can look to and say, okay, I can follow that path. I think that's really, really important. And secondly, when we were sort of starting out and embarking on this and looking for people that had that experience, of course, because it's fairly embryonic, if not completely embryonic in Malaysia, that experience wasn't necessarily here. And I have a really amazing team in Sustain. They work so hard at doing what we're doing. They are building capability and competence that will stand them in good stead for life. And I'm sure over the years, many other companies will probably pick some of them up. And I'm okay with that because we're teaching and learning and hopefully growing a better Malaysia. And so to your point, clearly we're doing it for Pos Malaysia. Clearly we're doing it for our employees. Clearly we're doing it for our customers. Clearly we're doing it for our P&L. But on a broader canvas, and I'm really proud about this, I think we're doing it for Malaysia. And that opportunity for other companies to come and learn from us, I think is really, really important.
No, I cannot agree more. I mean, at the end of the day, well, how will they say? Rubber hits the road.
Yeah.
And you're making it happen.
Yeah.
And then we can also you're generous enough to share with all of us that journey. And I think that's quite exciting. Now, Pos Malaysia has committed to reducing its GHG emissions in line with Science-Based Target Initiative. How is the progress going?
Good. Yeah, excellent. Good. As with all things, there are ups and downs, but generally speaking, going really, really well. So, as we have 6 work streams under sustainability. The one that probably gets the most coverage and most press is sort of the transition of our fleet from ICE to EV. And so we have about 6,500 bikes on the road, and we have about, as I mentioned earlier, about 1,000 4-wheel and trucks. And so as we sit here today, we're up to about 200 2-wheel EVs. And by the end of this year, beginning of first quarter next year, that'll be about 1,300. So we're really on track in terms of our 2-wheel. Our 4-wheel, by the end of this year, we'll have about 450 of our 4-wheel vehicles being electric. So from a pillar number 1 or work stream number 1, we're very much on track. Work stream number 2 is telematics. So with the remainder of our fleet, we're using tech and digital to become better stewards of how we use those vehicles. So, we did the same thing in Canada, and there's a ridiculous amount of CO2 produced from vehicles idling. So if you're sitting at traffic lights or parked outside a building and you leave the engine running in this country for air conditioning, that's throwing out CO2 by the bucket load. So we use telematics to operate our existing fleet a little bit better, but also create a safer environment. So we look at driving speeds, cornering, all sorts of other things that we can improve the safety of our drive. So it ticks 2 boxes, which is really fantastic. So that's going really, really well. Third one is packaging, and you can see here. So my head of marketing nearly had a heart failure when I spoke to her and said, we're going to remove all the colour from our bags and stuff like that. But that has a massive impact. I mean, online ordering has gone through the roof. My wife is an Olympic online orderer. And all that packaging goes into landfill. So we've removed colours. It's everything is recyclable. This is about 80% from recycled products. So the packaging we use and waste in general. Buildings I mentioned. So we will have, the end of this year, 17 buildings with solar panels. They generate, each of those buildings means we get about a 27% save in energy spend. Training, we're moving as much of our training as possible to digital. So not flying people into Bungie and other places, which is not necessary. So to your question, generally speaking, very well. Always more we can do. But generally speaking, we're on track. Yeah, we're on track.
Fair to say going green pays its way?
Like I said earlier, we don't do, and we just can't afford to. We don't do anything that doesn't tick those 3 C's. So it has to tick the cost bucket too. So this costs less.
Yep.
This costs less. Our vehicles cost less. Total cost of ownership of an electric vehicle is less than an ICE vehicle, so that's less.
Ooh.
Solar panels saves us money. So, like I said earlier, it's good for our people, good for the planet, and good for the P&L.
Excellent. Waste management, clearly, we've touched on it,
Yeah.
recyclable, but it is a very large organisation,
Yeah.
Charles. How do we approach it? What are we doing?
It's a bit
Because it'll be a challenge, right?
Yeah, it is. Depending on which activity you look at, it's a bit of push-pull. And I'll tell you, and again, for your viewers, a slightly amusing story. I learned this about 8 or 10 years ago. I was in Silicon Valley. And one of the founders of Facebook, who's no longer with Facebook, was telling the story, and it was a great story. He was telling the story about how Mark Zuckerberg was trying to convince his developers that to make Facebook fantastic, they needed to make it mobile friendly. So this is the early days of mobile phones and so on and so forth. And no matter how much he tried to convince people that the developers should do all of their development on mobile phones, they still went back to their PCs and would sit there every day working away on their PCs. So this gentleman was telling us this story that the tipping point for them was he came in one weekend and removed all of the PCs. And so when the developers came in on Monday morning, they had no choice. They had to go and work and do all the development on mobile phones. And that was their tipping point of how they moved Facebook. If you remember the early days of Facebook, it was pretty clunky and the UX was really quite terrible. How they moved it at a rapid rate from that to what it is today. And so, not that I'm Mark Zuckerberg, I just want to be clear, but I took a leaf out of his book when we were going through, to your point about waste and how much we contribute. We were printing paper like it's no one's business. And one of the work streams obviously was about how do we reduce that, both in our retail points. We have 631 retail points, 1.5 million unique customers coming in every month. We have 18,000 people. So that you can imagine the print, I think it was 7,000 trees a quarter or a month we were basically destroying. And so we went through that same sort of experience of convincing people that we should probably try and print less. And that was one of the things we really wanted to focus on, that we were going to change our behaviors, change processes, digitalize where we could. But over 3 or 4 or 5 months, it was really taking quite some effort. So learning from my experience with Facebook, we didn't quite do the same thing and come in at weekends, but during the night we sneaked all the photocopiers out.
Really?
Bar a couple, which some departments just cannot get off it, and remove them. So to your question, it's a bit of push and pull.
Yeah.
You have to, and I think that's a really good point that, again, being asked it
Bit
many
of dynamic tension.
a little bit, a little bit. And, it's like ripping the plaster off.
Yeah.
There's that initial pain. And when we did this, by the way, and we removed photocopies, I can assure you, there was quite a lot of noise from various functions and departments. But within days and weeks, it was gone. Your habits change and you learn to operate in a different way. So again, I guess for people who are sort of embarking on ESG and sustainability, their journey, you have to excite and energize. You definitely have to explain the why. The why is critical. So why are we doing this to everybody? But sometimes you need to strip the plaster and just make bold decisions that you're going to do things differently than you've done before. Yes, there's a little bit of pain. Yes, there's a little bit of risk, but for the better good of the organization and where you want to head to. So to answer your question, a bit of push and pull. Yeah.
I want to pick up on the why, because I think that's really important, because Pos Malaysia's reached about connecting people. So trust is fundamental.
Yeah.
How do we, in your, drawing on your broad experience, Charles, managing stakeholders, varied stakeholders.
Yeah. It's well, as you know,
transparency.
We have many stakeholders, and the unions want to know what we're doing and why we're doing it. Our employees want to know what we're doing and why we're doing it. The board, the CFO, there are many, my wife, there are many stakeholders who have an interest in why Pos Malaysia are doing what they're doing. But I'll tell you a really lovely story. And again, I share with it, not because we're perfect, because I hope it will help others who are going through a similar scenario. And going back to that question of why is why so important? So on the second day of us launching EV vehicles in Malaysia, we converted one of our facilities in Tamantoon, a post delivery location. So we have about 9 postmen there who deliver mail to the surrounding area. So I couldn't go down on the first day for different reasons, but on the second day or third day, it was like the second or third day. Second or third day, I thought I was so excited about us taking the first step and doing and not talking, that I said, I've got to go. I've got to go to TDDI and see them in action and so on and so forth. So I drove out there, and very honestly, I expected to get there and to be welcomed by people hugging me, sort of rose leaves being thrown in front of me, a statue being erected saying this is the best thing that anybody's done for Pos Malaysia ever. And the reality is, and this is absolutely true, the reality is, and it's a truism of life, a third of the 9, so three of the 9 were like, fantastic, love it, absolutely fantastic. People are stopping me in the street, my family love it, my friends love it, my customers love it, I love it, and they're great to drive, by the way. So 3 of them were big smiles, eyes lit up, super excited by it. A third of them were like, well, it's only day 2, let's see where we get to in a month's time. So a third are unsure. Yeah. And a third were actually not very happy. It won't go up the hills. Where do I charge it? It breaks down. It doesn't. This doesn't work the way the old bikes worked. And that's, going back to my point earlier. That is that change curve. Yeah. And so I think it's important for anybody who's embarking on this or going through it. And it was a good lesson for me, a very good lesson for me, that you can never explain enough the why. You can never explain enough the why. That's number one, is really make sure that you invest in explaining the why to your organization, to the board, to your CFO, to the unions, to whoever it may be, your stakeholders. And the second learning, and this is also as important, if not more important, is making sure that you don't fall into that trap of founder's remorse. It was my idea, therefore there's going to be nothing bad about this. It's the best thing that's ever been decided for Pos Malaysia. You have to keep the communication loop and your ears really open. Learn, learn, learn. Ask, ask, ask. What's working, what's not working, how do we make it better, and adjust the model accordingly. And I think that first experience with TDDI did both things. It reminded me that across 18,000 people, the board and whoever else, you need to constantly revisit that to make sure the why is understood. And the second thing is to make sure you keep that communication loop really open, so that you, from the lowest level, you hear up what's good and what they like about it, and also what's not good. And I'll just end that story with the 180 transition that Pos Malaysia has made. So in the very, very early days of our sustainability roadmap and execution, that experience at TDDI was kind of repeated pretty much at virtually every location where we were rolling out these change programs. Third happy, third not sure, and a third unhappy, and lots of questions. I bring it full circle to about 3 or 4 months ago. I was in Malacca, at our location in Malacca, and I walked in, and a courier who's been with Pos Malaysia for about 22 years, I've seen him many times, he came running over and he said, "Hey Charles, how are you?" I said, "Great, thanks." Talked a bit of football, as you always do, and he said, "Can I ask something?" I said, "Sure." He said, "When do I get my van?" And I went, it's happened. The transition has happened. When you start to get that feedback, people asking, "Hey, when can I be part of it?" then you know you're on the other side of that learning curve, where people have bought
hit the tipping
in.
point.
Exactly. So the why is super important. Keeping the feedback loop open, celebrate the successes, be prepared to learn from what doesn't work and change and adapt, and then move forward at pace here.
Now, I want to ask a personal question.
Sure.
Why do we do what we do as CEOs?
Why do we do what we do as CEOs?
Is it legacy? Impact?
I mean, I genuinely love doing what I do. We were talking about this yesterday, coincidentally. And I genuinely love, and I love it because as much as it is stressful, I mean, you know that, as being in the role you're in, and it comes with an element of stress. We have 18,000 people we're in charge of, we're responsible for, to create a great tomorrow. So I think and logistics has such a wonderful, I mean, again, for those who are not in logistics, I think it's super sexy and super fun. But we have this amazing ability to connect people and businesses in Malaysia and internationally, which is something to be incredibly proud of. To your question though, and linked to sustainability, Yeah, I think personally it's a bit about that. It's a bit. I really hope that in 200 years' time, and clearly I won't be around, nor will you, Dad, that somebody somewhere says, well, 200 years ago, we're here because 200 years ago people were brave enough
To pivot.
to make the right decisions and pivot. Yeah, and so I think that's a little bit personally self-serving, but I hope
Well,
that
for the right reasons, Charles.
I think so, yeah, but I think it's, to your
it's just
opening
around
remarks,
profit.
200 years old, an amazing company, every single city, every town, every village, every river, every lake, every mountain. We really have something to be very proud of. Let's hope in 200 years, because of the decisions we're making today, that Pos Malaysia is equally something to be proud of.
Oh, well, thank you. Our time together is drawing to a close, but what I call it, the elevator pitch. Make it real for our viewers. What can we do to make and embed sustainability in what we do? I mean, I always have the case in point, please buy wisely, because when we vote with our wallets, we CEOs tend to listen, but that's my pitch for today. Charles, what are your thoughts?
I think the number one is to just do it. To steal the phrase from another company that we all know, you just got to do it. If you look at what's happening around the world from a climate perspective, it's horrific. I mean, it's horrific. Just 2 or 3 days ago, we had that storm that came through Bursa, ripping out trees. So, I think this has moved well away from a nice to have to an absolute must have. So my advice and thoughts and elevator pitch to anybody is, please do it. It's our responsibility to make a difference.
Time's running out, because the longer we wait, the worse things are going to get.
Yeah, I think so.
And the effort required to fix it is more.
I think so.
Ounce of prevention, pound of cure. So thank you for joining us today. And more importantly, thank you, Charles.
You're very welcome.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.